Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 123 of the podcast. Today is Monday, June 10th, 2024, as I record this. Today we're talking to James Aylott about bringing the real world into your writing. We talk about his experience living in Florida and various other places in the US, and how very interesting experiences that he had turned into stories that were partially real, based on the chaotic realism that he experienced. So we talk a lot about managing that and, pantsing and plotting around taking real life events and putting them into a story. And, she's all around good time. You will notice if you're watching this on YouTube that there will be no video for the interview. James has asked that we don't do any video, which is not an issue at all. You'll just know that it's gonna cut to a little bit of a image only view of that. So, once again, just respecting the privacy of the authors that I'm working with. But in terms of news this week, from a homesteading standpoint, not a lot has changed. We're just trying to get into the flow of having a cow alongside all of the goats and the chickens. The kids have been coming out and helping us with chores. So it's something that we implemented last year. They're getting old enough that they can help with the chores. We just have to cater them a little bit to their age wherever they are. But it's very helpful. They get all dressed, come out in the morning and do all their stuff. Saves me quite a bit of time. Plus, they have a lot of fun. They have a better relationship with the animals. The one thing that, as glamorous as it is to say, that we're trying to work with the cow is that they eat a lot more and therefore they waste a lot more. Not only just the food itself, but a lot of manure. So we're trying to manage that and a lot more shoveling of all the fun stuff, which we don't have to get into any of the details. But at the end of the day, we just don't want it to get built up. With the goats, it's not too bad because really the scale is probably 1/10 of the cow. Now that we have a cow, we have to manage that. But otherwise, she's been very sweet. Her reactions are very calm. She's very collected. And I actually took her out to pasture for the first time last week, and she had a blast. I think she was a little confused when I got the halter on her. She's used to the halter. But when I took her out, I think she was a little bit nervous, but she saw all the fresh grass and she went crazy. So that is our next hurdle, is trying to figure out how can we get her out into the pasture, taking advantage of the little bit of land that we have. So we live on about 5 acres, but only probably three, maybe 3.2 of those acres are fields that are not very healthy right now. They're very weedy, which we're trying to manage that. But it's also been pretty dead because we haven't watered it. So this is the first year that I've had to figure out the irrigation. And can tell you what, I was exhausted last Thursday. The intent was to use our riding lawnmower to get me to and from, the back of our property, only to speed things up because I was going back and forth, back and forth. Unfortunately, the riding lawnmower is not working. I think because the battery died, so I can't get the motor started. So I just walked. I think it said I walked. My watch told me I walked about 10 miles that day, going back and forth to check on the irrigation. So our little property is really long and skinny. And the water, of course, is at the very back. So it has to come out of a few gates into the ditch in the back and run up towards the front of our property. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of walking. But I watered it and it seems successful. So that's good. Hopefully we actually see stuff grow and we can get her out there. Once we sort out the electrical fencing and put it all up, then we'll take her out every day. That'll save us on feed costs. So that's the intent. We'll see what actually happens, considering we have a baby due in about a month, which is kind of crazy. So in preparation for that, I'm trying to get a little bit ahead on my interview. So, but just be aware that if there is a week where I miss it, it could just be that I'm at the hospital, with the baby and my wife. So just be aware of that. In terms of authoring updates, not a significant number of updates there. I am kind of bouncing back and forth between editing Dragon Blooded, which is my YA portal fantasy, and To Commune with Spirits, which is the short story that I finished. My writers group got their eyes on the short story last week, and they liked it. There was just a little bit of I have this tendency when I'm discovery writing to front load stories and or chapters or books with a lot of world building, probably because I'm just discovering it. And then it takes me a minute to get to the point of the story, right? The crux or the goal of the main character. And so that was the main issue with the story was that it was just a little bit further in. So with a little bit of editing, I was able to pull that forward. I'm feeling a lot more confident with the story now, and that's very good. I'm looking forward to getting that ready to turn into Writers of the Future by the end of this month. So you may notice a couple changes for my website or my book selling website. I'm trying to emphasize selling direct. Now, what that means for me is really I haven't dabbled in Amazon ads for some time, and I'm just discovering that it's not really where I want to be. Could I learn it and make it work? Probably. I know there's a lot of people that make it work. But one, I'm not in KU, and I know they do work if you're not in KU. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's generally a little bit easier if your books are in KU. But also, I don't really love supporting Amazon, if that makes sense. So I'll never take my books off of Amazon. That's always going to be the case. I want them accessible and available to everybody. You can always buy them on Amazon, and that won't change. But in terms of ads, the whole competition around bidding for all of the ads, it just means more money for Amazon, right? At the end of the day. And that's not what I want, right? I'm looking for a sustainable author business career where I get more of the money than Amazon. And so that's why I'm trying to shift over to more direct sales. So all of that is to say that I was able to get my store updated. So now the URL dankennerbooks.com will take you directly to my store. Now, if you're still going to dankenner.com, great. There's nothing wrong with that. Head there, you can click on the store and it'll redirect you to the store just fine. But if you want to go to dankennerbooks.com, it'll show you everything there. I'm creating bundles for my books for the Library Chronicles and other various bundles. And if you're wanting to get those all together, then take a look at that and you might find what you're looking for. Figuring out all of the logistics around the print on demand with Book Vault, that's actually been really fun. It's a little bit of a steep learning curve, but I'm a pretty technical person, so I'm not too concerned about that. Now it really just comes down to getting into other forms of ads, such as Facebook/Instagram ads, and pointing them instead of to Amazon to my direct store and seeing where that goes. I anticipate this is going to take a little bit of time, but I'm in no hurry. I mean, I'm just really enjoying the process and figuring it out as I go. And it's really fun to build something that feels like my own, if that makes sense. You get a lot more satisfaction from doing it, knowing that, hey, I put in kind of the blood, sweat, and tears, so to speak, into this system, and it's working very smoothly. And people are having a good experience with the marketing, purchasing flow and everything. So yeah, that's really what I'm getting into. Other than that, just yeah, I'm trying to optimize things, make it a little bit more clear. Those of you who are listening, if you are on social media, you may have noticed that I have created instances or profiles for the casual author on Instagram and TikTok. Part of the reason I did that was I think there's just been some crossover of my audiences with those who are interested in my fantasy and sci-fi books, actual reading and supporting those versus those that like the podcast. Now I know that the groups cross over, but I think there's engagement wise on social media, I think it's confusing the algorithm a little bit. So if you're not following the casual author on Instagram or TikTok, go ahead and it's just the casual author. You'll find it. Go ahead and follow that, and I'll be posting the snippets from these episodes and announcements for each of the releases each week there instead. Now it's going to take me a while to build up because those are new profiles. I'm backdating all of the snippets to the first episodes. I can tell you what, listening back to the old episodes, whew, I was awkward. which I may still be awkward today. Who knows? Everybody is subject to their opinion. But goodness gracious, I've definitely learned a lot around podcasting and having a conversation. And it's just good to see the progress that you can make over a period of time. So, if anything, it's encouraging. And regardless of how awkward or strange I sound, I'm going to post them anyway. And people can revel in the awkwardness of my early podcasting days. So, there's that. But if you're listening and you want to comment on the any of the videos, any of the past episodes, definitely leave me a comment where you're listening, where you're from. I love to hear where my listeners are and what you think of the episodes. So I'll share some of those comments live on the podcast when I see those. And of course, if you're hoping, if you enjoy the podcast and you are looking to support me, if you want a little bit more access to content and updates, you can head to my Patreon, patreon.com/the casual author. And for a few dollars a month, you get some bonus content, Q&A episode, as well as some video homestead updates, which I'm already preparing the first one, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, any support you have to offer, I very much appreciate that. Obviously, podcasting is um, it can be arduous to edit things and put it together. But once again, I do it for you. I do it so that you can have content that you enjoy, positive, uplifting, casual content. So, no pressure, but if you'd like to support me there, you can at patreon.com/the casual author. Right. So let's go ahead and get over to the interview with James. Hey, James, how are you doing today?
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Excellent. I'm looking forward to diving into your stories, learning more about your writing and your plans for the future. Before we get into all that fun stuff, though, how long have you been writing and publishing?
So originally I was a photographer, so I used to always write photo captions, and as time went by, they became more elaborate. And as we used to say, never let the truth interfere with a good story. So I kind of progressed from there, and as I was wrapping up my sort of photography business, everyone's got a book in them, and I thought I had a pretty good book. I had a condo in South Florida, which was a converted 1950s motel with 12 apartments in it, studio apartments. And for whatever reason, it was a block from the beach, and the people living there, it was the craziest bunch of people that were living there. And I had an idea, well, why don't I just kept taking notes? Because people would come, people would go. Sometimes they would go in horrific ways, and sometimes the police would take them out, and people would arrive in the middle of the night, new people. So it was ripe for a book. So I kept taking notes, and I always had the idea there were 12 apartments in the building, and I would write a book where each chapter was one apartment, and you would look at the person from that apartment and you would tie them all in. So that was my first book, Tales from the Beach House, which came out in 2019.
That is absolutely fascinating. So a lot of these are based on true stories, then? Is that what I'm hearing?
Um, there's a fiction disclaimer in there, but
Well, sure.
if you read the book, I always say the boring stuff I made up, the crazy stuff you wouldn't believe, it's pretty much real.
That's usually backwards. Normally the crazy stuff is the made up stuff. So that's fascinating. I can imagine the notes that you took on these. So just make sure I understand correctly. You lived alongside these people in the apartments as well, or near
So
it? And
it was kind of like a vacation home. It was 396 square feet, and there were 12 of
okay,
these 396 square feet apartments. So I couldn't live in there full time, but people did live in there full time, which is probably why you had a certain eclectic type of person that could live in 396 square feet. So I would kind of parachute in and out. We had an office in Miami, so sometimes I would go down. It was about an hour north of Miami. Sometimes I'd go down there and work for a couple of weeks, and I'd use it as a vacation place. And it was almost like for me, it was like a log cabin because when I wasn't working, I would just go down there, turn the phone off, I'd have no internet there. I just read books on the beach and just kind of absorb the craziness of Florida.
that sounds actually really nice. I was going to ask you how it was possibly a vacation home being that small, but I guess you're outside all the time, so you just sleep inside the little space,
You
right?
you do, but there were people that if I'd go down there with my wife, it was it was better when you're on your own in a place like that because it's pretty easy to get untidy. But there were people that couples that lived in those places and worked from home and rarely came out for air. So people did live in them, but for me, it was more like it was a block from the beach. It had a pool. You could walk into town. It was my kind of log cabin escape.
That is very cool. Do you still go there sometimes, or is that
I do
no
not.
longer?
If you read when you read the book, you'll find out.
Oh, ooh,
So
that's a
there was
secret.
yeah, no plot spoilers, but the building was eventually bought. There was a homeowner feud. People were, it was kind of nutty. And in the end, a group of owners got together and sold it to a developer and kicked out the people that were causing the problems, kind of left as well. And the whole place got demolished and they put in sort of six luxury townhomes there. So it's kind of a
Oh,
shame. A lot of a lot of old Florida. This was really classic 1950s old Florida, and the thing got bulldozed and I guess gentrified. So
oh, well, I mean, it feels like it's a matter of time before
yeah,
that
and that was
happens.
part of the inspiration of the book. I was kind of like it shouldn't end like this. This is not the ending that this building deserved. So anyway, I incorporated what happened to the real beach house in the fictional beach house and
Yeah,
kind of played that. So that
that's
was part
really.
of the, I it just all came together. I just kept taking notes and I'm like, okay, I think I've got a book here. Um, as I was wrapping up my photography business and we were in the process of selling the business, I started writing the book. And I got about four or five. I got the outline. I spent like 6 months writing the outline of this thing, getting my characters together. And I wrote about four or five chapters. And then I kind of did like a midlife crisis masters. I jetted off to
Mm,
London for a year. I did a master's. I put the book on the back burner. I knew I wanted to write it. I came back, finished my master's, and luckily I came back 3 days early because my first daughter was born the next day after I came back. So then I'd finished the master's. And I was basically doing daddy daycare. I was a stay-at-home dad. So I'm like, okay, this is my chance to write the book. I've got a baby here. She sleeps a considerable amount of time of the day. I'm going to write this book while she's napping. I think J.K. Rowling did a similar thing, and I went back, looked at what I'd written before. Some of it I'd written in the pub after work, and I thought it was brilliant. But when you actually write stuff in the pub after about three margaritas, it's not as good as you think it is. So I went back, I
imagine.
rewrote the first 4 to 5 chapters, and I kind of gave myself a target. I was going to write a chapter a week. So I did that. So in 16 weeks, I wrote the first draft of the book. And then, yeah, so that was it. It was written, and I put it away for a bit. And then I started querying it, and that's a brutal blood sport, I guess. And eventually, I think it took me about 11 months. I did get an agent that took it up. So I think it's a very small percentage of people get agents. So I got an agent. He liked it, and then we queried it. Submitted it to publishers for about a year and a half, and he just didn't get anywhere. He said that the Florida fiction market is kind of saturated. So
Oh,
I said, okay,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, it's a genre in itself. Florida fiction is, it's a genre. And he just said it's kind of flooded. And I'm like, okay, I got to do something with this book. I took this time off to write it. So I self-published it, learned it as I went. And yeah, I self-published it. I got an artist to do the cover. I got it edited, and I did pretty good, I think. I'm up to about four between downloads and audiobook and print copies. I'm at up to about 4,500 copies, which I think is decent for basically a nobody that's never written a book before.
I would say absolutely decent for anybody listening. Just keep in mind that obviously self-publishing is challenging. There's a lot of things that go into it, but even I think I heard some metric that even a lot of traditionally published books only sell a few handful of copies per year. So I would say that's very successful. And so how was it hard holding on to your book? for that long with the agent unable to find traditional publishers? Did you have a hard time waiting while they struggled?
I'm kind of I don't like to wait around, and I'm a bit, I was probably on the phone to him more than he wanted and had more ideas than the agent wanted. And I kind of think out of the box a bit. So, but he said, I said, what are the odds of this getting picked up? And he said 20%.
Mm,
And so from what I understand, the odds of getting an agent are 3%, and the odds of an agent submitting it and getting it picked up is 20%. And then out of the books that get picked up, I don't know, something like 10% of them do good.
hmm
So your odds of writing a book and doing well with it traditionally published, once I worked out the statistics, and it's sort of like I don't know, 0.5% or something like that or less. Um, so at the same time, I also had from back in my journalism days, one of my former staff members, he became a talent agent in Hollywood. So he actually read it and he said, you know what, I like this book. I'm going to option this.
Hmm.
So he said, but you got to publish it. So that was kind of one of the other things I was like, well, you know what, if he's going to option it, I need to publish it. I'm just going to publish it myself, and then he can option it. So he's actually still kind of touting that at this very moment. He's actually got an actor attached to it. But from what I understand, that's another low odds game. And I think it took Martin Scorsese 9 years to get The Irishman made by Netflix. And yeah, he's Martin Scorsese. So we'll see what happens there.
I
But
mean,
the book, I submitted it for a couple of awards. I won a Midwest Book Award,
thanks.
first place, and a Florida Writers first place. But of course, the awards shows were in 2020, and they were virtual. So my moment uh, my moment of glory was in my living room. So,
I mean, that's where we all were in that year. COVID, the beginning of COVID was something else, right? All the fun things. Um, But I mean, I thought, what a really cool story because I know there's a lot of people who are spending a lot of time looking for agents. They're trying to go the traditional publisher route. I know there's a lot of people that like myself, who I was just uninterested in querying. I just knew it wasn't for me, so I didn't even want to write query letters. I just went straight to self-publishing. But it's interesting, right? Because your story kind of highlights some of the challenges with traditional publishing. Not that there's not challenges in self-publishing, but and yet you overcame it. Your book's out there, seems to be doing very, very well, and it's always there for you to keep making use of. You can keep marketing it. You can keep talking about it on podcasts and whatnot. And it's your content to do whatever you want with it. I'm curious to know what were the logistics of, because you didn't sign away the rights or anything. Obviously, you didn't have a contract with the publisher. So what did that conversation look like with your agent? You just said, "Hey, I think I'd rather just self-publish this." And he said, "Okay." Or,
I guess said, well, what are the chances here? And he said, well, I can keep sending it around. And he said, I don't want to hold you back. And I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to self-publish it. And he said, it's easy to do, but it's harder to actually sell books. And I
yeah.
realized pretty quickly he was onto something.
hmm
Because it's not easy. And I think probably the hardest sort of like number of books to shift is that between 100 and 200. I think if you can get over the 200 hump, then you got a good chance of getting to 1,000. But I can see how you can easily get stuck at the 100 hump once you've sold it to all your friends and everyone you handed out a business card to at the coffee shop. So
I think you assume that I have that many acquaintances. I don't even think I sold 100 to my friends. I mean, I've sold more than 100 to be clear, but it was to a bunch of people I don't know. I don't have that many acquaintances. So good for you for
yeah,
having that many. I think that's
well,
great.
I kind of hit people up in the coffee shop. I see someone reading a book. I was like, you know what, you might like this book. So,
I mean,
but
that works.
it worked. It got me to 100 somehow. I got to 200, and then I, you know, I put it on Kindle Unlimited for a bit, and I got something like 800,000 page reads, which was pretty good. So somehow I don't know. Did I feel like I did good with the first book. So but then I kind of felt like, well, really the only way to make money out of a book is having it turned into a TV show. So my second book I kind of wrote with I wrote a very colorful and theatrical, and basically I wrote a TV show. So I don't know if that's a good thing to do or a bad thing to do, but that's kind of what I did. And that one comes out in June, and that is set in St. Louis, where I live now. And I took a kind of a similar approach to how I did the first book. I set it in an apartment building and focused on different people I'd met, and turned them into characters, and had each person, each central character living on one corner unit in the floor of an apartment building that overlooks the St. Louis Arch. So it's a little like, like Missouri is kind of like Florida. We don't have the beaches here, but the population is more heavily armed. So there's certainly, and they're just as crazy. So it's a little like Florida fiction, but it's Missouri fiction. So you take a bit of Carl Hyson and you take a bit of Gillian Flynn, and you structure it like Geoffrey Chaucer, and that is the book.
That is an incredible explanation of your book. I'm already fascinated to read. I obviously the book isn't out yet, but I'm fascinated to learn more about it. Do all these people know that you've included them? Maybe not their real names, but their stories in these books, or like if they were to read it, would they know that you were writing about them, or not necessarily?
Some definitely, some I hope not. Um,
Goodness.
there's a there's one that yeah, that's a I hope not. Some of them it's subtle. Like when I was plotting out my characters, I did this a similar thing. I was like, okay, I need X amount of characters because each one is going to live in one of these apartment
Hmm.
units, and I could never, find my leading lady. But then I was in a coffee shop once, and I saw kind of a kind of a cute girl with sunglasses and a big hat writing poetry in the corner, and I'm kind of like, this person is shouting out to me, finding out what her story is. And then I got talking to her, and it was perfect. She used to work as a trapeze artist in City Museum, which is our local kind of zany. It's like a massive snakes and ladders amusement park
Hmm.
museum, and she used to work in there. And she was from a rural state, and she told me her story, and I was like, okay, this is the basis of my character. And then I actually bumped into her a couple other times. And once she was with her boyfriend, I was like, well, how did you guys? Because, being a former journalist, I grill people. I get the whole life story out of them. And I was like, how did you meet your boyfriend? And she's like, oh, in the apartment building here. And I'm like, okay, so that basis, I'm like, okay, well, if this was my character, how would she meet her boyfriend in the apartment building? But this is Missouri. How do people meet each other? Because they hide away because the weather's so extreme. Well, it had to be when there was a tornado siren going off. Because one of the things I learned here, when a tornado siren goes off, everybody doesn't go into their basement. They all go to their front door and they start standing in the street and talking to each other. So I'm like, well, this is how these people would meet. So I kind of, I took a real person, and I embellished them heavily and took some of the real story and then made them my own. So that was my leading lady. But yeah, most of the people, most of what I put in my characters, I find somewhere in real life. And when I talk to people, sometimes I say, you don't want to end up in one of my books. It's not good for you. But that's
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 hilarious.
how I do my research.
So you just constantly taking notes as you're living your life, like on your phone, or do you have like a notebook where you write these things down? I'm impressed how you can just go about your day and take notes about
I,
things.
I literally I take notes. I'll say someone will say something. I say that hold on, I gotta write that down. Or I was listening to NPR and there was a great line. Someone was reading a book or something, and they said you should always know your second wife first, something like that. And I was like, this is fantastic because in my book I got a love triangle where the old girlfriend cruises into town. And I was like, this is the kind of thing that someone from LA would say. That's what we say in LA is know your second. It's always good to know your second wife first. So I just write stuff like that down, or I'll see people and I'm like, I got to write this down, or I just forever take notes. So I've actually, so that's my second book is set in St. Louis. The third book, which I've just finished, it's been through 2 rounds of editing, and I'm querying again with a good luck with that. Um, that's a road trip novel, Route 66, father and daughter. So I have a 6-year-old daughter. She goes to a kind of a ritzy high school. I Yeah, some of the inspiration for how a father and his daughter would be traveling across America has come part from my daughter, whether we have the flashbacks of how they grew up together, and part from some of the sort of like the high school community that I'm rubbing shoulders with. So that's how that's inspired that book. And I'm actually plotting out a fourth book, and that is going to be set in the 90s Los Angeles, and that's based on I was a paparazzo photographer in LA in the 90s, and that's going to be based in that kind of world. So yeah, so I've looked at the kind of books that you do, and it's more fictional universes. My stuff is all kind of in the real world and inspired by real people.
I think that's amazing. And it makes it even more, I guess, fascinating to read, knowing that these may or may not be based on real people. Um, But yeah, I think it's cool that you've taken these aspects, these elements that you've experienced in your life, and turned them into. You mentioned something when you messaged me about the authenticity of your novel, right? There's just a lot of realistic nature and realistic people in your books, which makes it probably even more funny because I think they're somewhat comedy, right? Kind of dark comedy. Is that where
The
the
second book is more comedy. The first book, I could never pinpoint the genre of it. There is comedy,
fair
there's
enough?
dark humor, there's literary fiction, and so when I got one of the, I just wrote that thing. I
It's
didn't
just
really
wrote
have an
it.
idea. I just sat there writing it, and then I got halfway through. I was like, there's not much dialogue on it, and I guess it's a light on dialogue book. Um, and and someone did say this book is all over the place with its genres. Is it a comedy? Is it a romantic novel? What is it? And that is probably a fair comment. The second novel, I went just kind of straight more for the comedy aspect. But yeah, it's and the third book is that's completely different. I'm like just turned it on my head, and that really is. Um, I think someone called it inspirational. I wouldn't
Hmm.
call it that. But apparently, it's somewhat inspirational. Is the genre. So
Interesting. I mean, that's very cool. That's the great thing about writing is if you have an interest, you can kind of write anything. And it seems like you've bounced around a little bit. Um, but as long as you're enjoying it, I think that's all that matters. So, so in the first book, just make sure I understand properly, that's almost like a collection of short stories of the 12 or just the different apartments and the stories of the people in them, or do they intermingle into like a
they
kind of
all they all intermingle. Both
okay.
books. Probably the first one is more a collection of short stories, and then the
Sure.
last 4 chapters, or 3 chapters, it's all the characters together.
Got it.
Um,
Okay.
the second book is more of a narrative. It's almost like 3 stories combined, and at the end they'll come together. A bit
Mm.
like that Tom Cruise movie Magnolia. It's a little like that. It starts off on a hot, steaming night in St. Louis. You flash back 8 days, and then you kind of finally get to the first chapter at the end, and most of the everything kind of comes together. Um, but I don't know if this is a genre that people necessarily read anymore. Possibly I don't read enough new fiction, but it does seem that it's sort of like romance and erotica and sort of fantasy is seems to me where the book market is at the moment.
Well, I mean, if you the true reality of the book market is that it's mostly erotica and or just as people like to coin it, spicy romance, with explicit scenes and whatnot. That is a very, very huge market. I think it's something like I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I want to say like I can't remember. I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were talking about it. Something like 80% of the market is those books. It's a very, very huge part of the market. And then, of course, trailing behind it, very, very, very far behind it are things like sci-fi, fantasy, genre fiction, mystery, those types of things, which are all kind of equal with each other. But yeah, there's definitely a very high interest in that erotica stuff. Um, but I mean, it doesn't mean you can't be successful with what you're writing. You found success with your first book. Granted, it was published in 2020, I think you said, right? Or 2019.
2009,
Mhm.
2019.
So just a little
Yeah,
while
I
ago.
don't know if the book market has changed since then. I don't, everything evolves, but by, I'm kind of like a fade to black
Hmm.
person, if anything, a little naughty. So I really, I'd be curious how my next book is received. I did blurb reviews, and one of them had trigger warnings on it. I'm like, what the hell is a trigger warning? I'm like, ooh. Another one said it was reminiscent of a book that, and I looked at this book and I was like, oh my God, this came out in 1972. Because it's quite, it's a bit rude and moldy and crazy. It'll be interesting. We'll see how it does, and maybe the first book did well because it's set in Florida, and there is a market for people that will pick up a book set in Florida because it's set in Florida. Everybody knows Florida man,
Hmm.
alligator, kind of crazy enough. I don't know. Missouri. When you think about Missouri, is there a glamour aspect? What do you have? It's gun crime, crazy weather, um, a city that's falling apart. I don't know if it has the same aspirational effects as something like Florida does. But and that to me that was the appeal of the book. When I first moved to Los Angeles, someone said to me, "Hey, you just moved here. You need to take notes because the crazy stuff here, it'll become like normal within a couple of years." And when we moved to St. Louis, I started noticing. I'm from England. I'd lived in the US for 25 years. I'd never heard a gunshot. Within
Hmm.
about a month in
Hmm.
St. Louis, I'd heard gunshots. And I'm like, this isn't like a pop here and there. This is people duking it out with AR-15s. I'm like, well, this is wild. You go the wrong direction in St. Louis, and you've never seen anything like it. I'm like, there are portions of the city that are just like rotting and left behind, and you're like, well, how does something like this happen? I'm like, how is this allowed to happen? So these are kind of things to me I'm like, well, this is interesting. You walk into a store there or on the Metro link, which they actually call the murder link here because it's so dangerous. And there are signs on there that say no guns allowed and you can't take a gun on this thing. And I'm like, I've never been to a city where every office or shop has a sign that says no firearms permitted in the city. So these kind of things, you just kind of like, well, this is kind of interesting. So I took a load of notes, but whether this is interesting for people in the rest of the country, I don't know. But to me, I found St. Louis a fascinating place where you literally, because of the way the city depopulated, you will have robber baron mansions on a block that cost what a house in San Francisco 5% of the price of a similar house in San Francisco, and then you'll go 3 blocks the other way, and I'm like, it's an abandoned city that's falling apart with potholes and literally houses are collapsing.
Hmm.
And you're like, how is there such a disparity in wealth in 3 blocks? And the people in the robber baron mansions, they pick bullet shells out of they find bullet shells in their back garden because people are
Gosh.
just shooting them off. And things like New Year's Eve here, you open the back door and it sounds like a war's going off. I'm like, for 20 minutes, people are just blasting their guns into the air. So these kind of things, I just found I found it astonishing and interesting, and I just kept writing it down and incorporated that into the book.
Well, I mean, so I think that's what's you mentioned earlier that you're not sure how a book will sell or how well it will do in the current market. And I think the reality of the situation is that there are readers for nearly everything all over the place, right? Like, I think just because a huge portion of the market is erotica doesn't mean that those same people don't like reading other things. And I think it's just important to find the audience that you're looking for. I mean, there's billions of people in the world. Assuming it's accessible from a language perspective and or just like being able to access it, you'll be able to find your readers. It's just about finding them, right? It's that marketing aspect. It's about telling that story. But the fact that you have all these real life experiences, I think, is what makes it so interesting, right? When people read your books, they'll know, oh, this may or may not have been a real person. that's so fascinating, right? These crazy things that are written in here may have actually happened. And that
Yeah,
just
yeah.
makes it so much more interesting.
So I have a scene where there's a certain events happen and there's a riot in the city. This is based on a riot I watched out of my window. I watched a mob of people
Gotcha.
come down and loot the art gallery at the bottom of my store. I'm like, coming out of the daycare one day, I was seconds. The difference between caught in a 90 bullet gun battle and not was my daughter saying, Daddy, I don't want to walk. I want to get in the buggy. And there's a bullet hole buggy hide on the daycare wall. So I'm like, it's a very authentic book about a very authentic place. But, sometimes people want fantasy and fiction. Not, it might be a bit too real. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. I think, I mean, if it there like myself, I generally read a lot of fantasy, sci-fi, but I will read pretty much anything as long as it is well written, right? I just like fascinating stories in set in whatever genre. I don't like to read erotica. I'm not really interested in that type of book, but as long as the writing is compelling, then I'll get into it. I think there's a lot of people that are like that. But you mean just that story that you highlighted is insane that you experienced that, but more importantly, that you were able to
yeah.
process it well enough to write it down
But
to
the good
capture
news is I moved out of
the
downtown. It
story.
just, I'm like, I've got 20 stories like that. But yeah, the book is based downtown, and it's real. So it's kind of gritty. It's kind of dark humor on sort of a tragic situation. Um, so we will see how it does. We will see. It's I was going to say one of the I've listened to your podcast. You talk about the writing experience. I say one of the problems I have had is being British. I keep having I have to have like three levels of editing to extract the
Mm,
Britishism out of the writing. And I know you, for whatever reason, use British spelling.
I do. I don't know why, but I do.
Yeah, but it's like driving me nuts because even the other day, I'm on a second round edit on something, and the person called a spanner in the works. He said that nobody uses the word spanner here; it's wrench.
Mm.
So it's just like weird. Yeah, I find that quite hard. Different spellings of words, different phrases. So that's that is an obstacle. I, I will say that.
When you're not really sensitive to it because that's just what you experience. That's the reality for you. So you need a specific set of editors to catch those things. Someone who's not British, I would imagine, or are you working with British editors?
I have worked with British editors, and first editor I used, she didn't actually want to do the second book because she said that it's driving me nuts with the Americanisms in it. So I've had I go with a combination of British and American, and
Yeah.
I run stuff through my wife, and I'll call her up and say, hey, would someone use this word? And she would say, well, I know it from you, but no, nobody's going to use that word. Nobody know
Mm.
what you're talking about. So that is a bit tricky. And I've lived in the US for most of my life, so it's kind of it's tricky. That is a tricky aspect of the writing.
I mean, it sounds like you need to write a book about someone, a British person living in America, and then you can have an excuse to write some of those in there and just make it funny. It could be a comedy
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I could when I do my LA book, I would probably incorporate something like that.
You
Some of
should.
the differences.
I like that you said
Because
when you write your LA books, you already have plans for
so
an
I
experience
plan
in
to
LA,
yeah. So about 25 years ago, I wrote a film script because that's what you do when you're in LA.
right?
And anyway, I've dug that out. I'm gonna take parts of that, and that'll be the basis of the book. Heavily, heavily changed. I've got a title, and if I can find a picture, I've got a cover shot. I've got a picture of Sean Penn's hand just about to hit my face, and I'd love to use that picture um, for the cover, but I've got to find it somewhere rotting in a box next to Pamela Anderson and O.J. Simpson pictures.
Well, you it sounds like you've had quite some experiences. And I was wondering actually, do you have photos? Do you include photos in your books from these real places since you were a photographer beforehand? Or is
I do
that
not.
something you do not? Okay.
I do not. I did for my St. Louis book. I did take the picture of the cover, and I worked from that. But I do not take pictures for the books. I don't even have an author shot. I'm kind of like a recluse. I don't.
I
I
noticed that
like. I was
actually.
always like that. When I ran my Hollywood paparazzi agency, I lived in Northern California, at the top of a mountain, and nobody. It took about 3 years before any of the magazines realized I wasn't living in Los Angeles. I just had a 310 number, so I'm kind of a recluse. I'd rather, I don't know how the St. Louis book will be received by the local population. They might be horrified. I think one of the reviews said nobody is spared. So it's better that people don't know who I am.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was noticing that there's no picture of you. So, which yeah, if that's how that there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great. There are a lot of people prefer anonymity when they're writing, and that's why people have pen names, right? But that's fascinating. I think you should consider including photos in some of your books. Not all of them, but some of them. I just think that would be a very interesting um, a component to that maybe without your face, just locations or buildings or scenery. I just think it would be interesting to connect kind of the real situation to potentially a real place. That could
I
be
would
fun
probably, for
as well.
St. Louis book, I'd probably do a posting on Instagram with some of the real
That
local.
could work.
Yeah.
Are you a big social media person then?
No, I hate social media. So
Okay, well, that's
yeah, hate it, man.
that's fair.
Facebook's for old people. I'm not old enough, but I do have a Facebook account that I tried some posts, but I just don't like it. I did have a Twitter account at one point. I imploded that, and I've got an Instagram. I don't like it. But I try.
Well, I mean, that's all that matters. I'm curious to know how you're finding your readers then, because your first book has done pretty well. How did you market then without the use of social media? Obviously, it's possible, but I'm just curious to know what you did.
I did some Twitter them.
Hmm.
I may or may not have spammed a few people on Goodreads, which I wouldn't recommend. Um, I got a bit of a bump when I won the book awards, so that was good. And I did get, I think a magazine picked it up in Florida. I got a local magazine. It just sort of like a bit of guerrilla marketing here and there. Sort of, it seemed to work. And I think I got, at some point I must have been in a recommended reading on the Amazon, however they do it, because I was
Mm,
getting downloads on Kindle. And I kind of like the Kindle Unlimited. I took it off in the end, and I may put the next book on it. I may not. I don't. I kind of like it, and I don't like it. It's sort of I like what it is, but I don't like that you have to be exclusive to Amazon because when you do look at your sales reports and you look at your advertising and you look at your costs, you're like, there's really only one winner here, and it's Amazon. I'm like,
mhm.
I calculated how much Amazon made out of me, and I'm like, well, that's pretty nice. But at the same time, they're offering you the biggest bookstore in the world and a free seat in it. So you can complain, but you can't really because they're probably doing you more of a favor than you're doing them.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a much larger conversation to be sure, but obviously there's pros and cons with being in Kindle Limited and being not in Kindle Limited. It really just depends on you, your business model, how you want to reach your readers. But yeah, I mean, I know that recently there's been a lot of challenges with Kindle Unlimited. Obviously, not speaking to yeah, specific stories, but with pirating going on and books getting accounts getting shut down because Kindle Unlimited is exclusive. So if they find a version of your book, you get shut down. Um, I hear the royalties actually decreased significantly recently as well, which a lot of people are grumbling about. So I think, Amazon is still the biggest player, and I think they will be for a while. But I am curious to know with all these other subscription models going up, how Kindle Unlimited will be affected by it over time. So time will tell. It's hard to say. But I think the basis is don't put all your eggs in one basket if you can. Try to have multiple locations for things if it makes sense for you. I've heard a lot of people suggest that. So a lot of people are moving to selling direct. Have you considered selling direct with your books or not
I
so much?
I haven't, man, because it's that involves like running to the post office and needing more room in the garage. So
Well, it can. It doesn't have to. So have you ever heard of Book Vault by any chance?
I have, but I haven't explored it. So
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, something that I just started dabbling in it. I haven't marketed or really directed a lot of people to my site, but you can set up direct sale. So essentially, they would order from whatever website. Let's say you're using Shopify or something to that degree, and it's print on demand. So you actually don't have to hold the stock. They order it from you, and then it prints on demand and ships it to them, like Amazon from Book Vault, except it's through you instead. So you get more of the royalties. There's no middleman. It's just direct through you, print on demand. So that's if you don't want to hold stock, that's a good option. And you do end up getting more royalties if you direct people through that way. Um, I recommend it. I've set my books up, and now people can order direct from me. So that's kind of cool. And I don't have to
yeah.
have a ton of stock. So
Huh. The problem I have with my second book is it's so long. So like the
uh,
actual money you make, I got it down from 110,000 words to 106, but I'm like, I think that's too long for a book. So the margins on a paperback book or a hardback book
yeah,
are pretty slim there.
it's
But
it's just so different in the genres because I hear when you said long book, I thought you were going to say 250 to
uh,
I read fantasy, so fantasy and sci-fi 110 is like on the shorter end of
okay.
books. So I was like, oh, that's not too bad. Most of the books I write are about 110, except for my epic fantasies, which ended up about 190 each. So
But then
those,
the other problem, the way it's structured, as it really is like one chapter is focusing
yeah,
on one apartment. Some of these chapters, I had complaints that the chapter, they're like, this chapter is 40 pages long. And I said,
uh, yeah,
it's a prisoner of the structure. Just get a
hmm
bookmark and read it in bits. But I think people, they want, I do see that short chapters is kind of a trend these days.
yeah. I have noticed that as well. So maybe something to keep in mind as you're writing your next ones, potentially shorten chapters. And I also read and write long chapters. I like long chapters personally. So, but I know there's a
I
different
don't mind. I
interest in
did that
markets.
the book that I'm editing now, that it's a shorter book. We got it down to I think 74,000 words.
Nice.
Chapters are shorter. It's still because I seem to have books that are prisoners of the structure, and this one is a
Hmm.
similar kind of quirky structure. The chapters are longer than the could be if it was different structure. So when I write my Los Angeles book, it's going to be completely uh, there'll be short chapters. It's not
Yeah,
going to be no structure holding it captive.
very cool. Well, looking forward to that. That comes out in June, you said, correct?
So Tales of Whiskey Tango from Misery Towers is out in June. Correct.
Correct. Very good. Well, it's coming right around the corner. I'm sure it'll be right upon us before we know it. But we are running a little short on time. So before we end here, where can people find more information about you and your books?
I do not have an author website. It's probably something I should have, but I feel like you have to keep updating those things. Otherwise, it's
Mhm.
and being a recluse, it would kind of go against my nature. So yeah, my books, they're on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. You can order them through Ingram Spark, and anywhere you can buy books.
Yeah,
So
very good.
where you can find more information about me, pretty much hopefully nowhere. So as I
Okay, very
yeah, I do
cool.
have an Instagram page. You won't find much out about it. This podcast is probably the most information I've ever divulged in my life. So
Well,
uh,
there you go.
this is it. If you want more information, keep rerunning this.
It's over and over, and that's all you
Yeah,
can get. I like
that's
it.
it.
I like that decision. Well, very good. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a great conversation.
Hey, great. Thank you very much for your time.
I hope you found that interesting. I know I really enjoyed talking to James. He was just a delightful person. His insight around writing and his just all around crazy stories that he experienced are just entertaining to no end. So if you want to pick up his book, you can. Just check out the show notes for links to his site, his books, wherever you can find him. And you want to grab those. So next week, we'll be talking to Tommy Lee Sexton about balancing your interests, your writing, and just everything while putting it all together, creating a symbiosis of all of those things. So I think you'll really enjoy that conversation. You'll want to join me next week for that. Of course, if you want to join me on the podcast, or you know someone, an author, or anyone related to writing, publishing that would like to join me, just head to thecasualauthor.com. You can fill out the form there. It's the easiest way to let me know that you'd like to join me. I do work through them as, the moment they come in, or I guess in the order they come in. So just be patient with me as I get to you. May take a week or two, but I definitely will respond. Or, of course, you can email me at dan@thecasualauthor.com and I'll get back to you as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode and I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye.